In this country, all it takes is one cable to get electricity. For free. No contract, meter, or even an application form. No waiting, just a metal hook, a length of wire, and 30 seconds of nerve. Throw it over the line on the pole outside your house and the lights come on. Simple as that. 230 million people live in Pakistan. Tens of millions of them get their electricity exactly this way. And here is the thing that should stop you cold. Pakistan has enough power plants to light every home in the country. The capacity exists. The electricity exists. So why are the lights still off for 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day? That question has an answer, but the people who know it are not talking. Every wire you see has a story. Most of them are not supposed to be there, but they are keeping someone alive. The copper ceiling, a sky made of wire. Look up. Not in the sky. There is no sky here, nor in the way you're used to seeing it. What is above the streets of Karachi, Lahore, Rawalpindi, Peshawar, above virtually every Pakistani city and town, is not open air. It is wired. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Black cables sagging between poles wrapped around transformers, running across rooftops, disappearing into windows, snaking through walls, emerging from ceilings. A web so thick that in some neighborhoods the sun barely reaches the ground. This is not infrastructure, it is improvisation. And this is what happens when a state makes a promise and breaks it, and 230 million people decide to solve the problem themselves. Welcome to Pakistan's electric sky. The first thing you notice is its sheer volume. Pole after pole, disappearing under the weight of cables that were never supposed to be there. In the older parts of Karachi, Liari, Orangi Town, Baldia, the wires are so dense they look almost structural, like the city needs them to hold itself up. The second thing you notice is that nobody looks up. Not the chai seller on the corner, nor the rickshaw driver threading through traffic. Even the children playing cricket in the narrow lane below do not look up. The wires are so familiar, so permanent, so completely woven into the fabric of daily life that they have become invisible. And when something becomes that familiar, that permanent, that woven into the texture of everyday life, it stops being a problem. It just becomes the way things are. Pakistan loses over $1.2 billion annually to electricity theft alone. That is not a rounding error. That is enough money to build dozens of hospitals, thousands of schools, and hundreds of kilometers of roads. It disappears every year into the wires above the street. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what Pakistan was supposed to be. When the country was founded in 1947, electricity was a promise. It was a modern state that had a functioning grid, power for homes, factories, and farms. The Water and Power Development Authority, WAPDA, was established in 1958 to make that promise real. Dams were built, power plants were constructed, transmission lines were laid across the country. On paper, the system worked. Pakistan today has a generation capacity of over 40,000 megawatts. Hydroelectric dams, thermal plants, nuclear stations, wind farms, solar installations. The country can produce enough electricity to power every single home within its borders. So why can't it? Here is where the story gets uncomfortable. The electricity exists. The problem is the gap between generating it and getting it to the person who needs it. Pakistan's transmission and distribution network is old, overloaded, poorly maintained, and hemorrhaging electricity at every step. Technical losses, power that simply disappears during transmission due to old cables and failing equipment, run at nearly double the global average. But technical losses are only half the story. The other half is what the industry calls non-technical losses, a polite term for electricity that is not paid for, stolen power, unbilled consumption, the kunda. In some distribution zones in Pakistan, non-technical losses run above 50%. More than half of all electricity distributed simply vanishes, unmetered, unpaid, unaccounted for. The utility companies know it, and the government knows it too. So do the meter readers walking past the illegal connections every month know it. Everyone knows. And the wires stay up. I have been working on these lines for 22 years. In that time, I have seen everything. Legal connections, illegal connections, meters that have been tampered with, meters that were never installed. I know every pole in my area. I know which connections are official and which are not. Most of them are not. That is a lineman who works for one of Pakistan's electricity distribution companies. He asked us not to use his name. In Pakistan, talking too loudly about the Kunda system can be complicated. He will be our guide through this story, because the view from the pole, from the man who actually touches the wires, is different from the view from the ministry. And it is considerably more honest. The heart of this story is simple. Pakistan has 40,000 megawatts of generation capacity. It suffers from 12 to 16-hour blackouts. Somewhere between those two facts is a catastrophic failure of infrastructure, governance and political will that has been building for decades and that nobody in power has been willing to genuinely confront. Why not? That is the question this documentary will answer. And the answer involves not just incompetence, though there is plenty of that, but something more deliberate, more calculated, more troubling. Because the darkness in Pakistan is not an accident. For certain people, it is a business model. During Pakistan's worst load-shedding periods, some areas went without power for up to 20 hours a day, in a country where summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius, where food spoils without refrigeration, where children cannot study after dark, where small businesses cannot function. This is not an occasional inconvenience. This is a permanent condition, and it has been going on for decades. Go back to the wire above the street for a moment. Look at it again. Really look at it this time. That wire did not appear overnight. It was not put there by criminals, anarchists, or people who simply wanted something for nothing. It was put there by ordinary people, fathers, mothers, shopkeepers, factory workers, who needed electricity and had run out of options. The official system failed them, so they built their own. That is not a uniquely Pakistani story, it is a human one. When people need something and the state cannot provide it, they find another way. The Kunda is that other way, illegal, dangerous, normalised, and for the tens of millions of people who depend on it every single day, absolutely essential. People ask me if I feel bad about the illegal connections. I tell them, go spend one summer in a Rangi town with no power, then tell me what you feel bad about. The sky above Pakistan is made of wire, and every wire tells a story of a promise made and broken. Made again and broken again, until the people on the ground stopped waiting and started solving the problem themselves. One hook at a time and then a wire at a time. Gradually, it moved from one neighbourhood to the next until the theft became the system, and the workaround became the norm. Even the illegal became, in every practical sense that matters, the law. How did it get this far? To answer that, we need to understand exactly what a Kunda is, how it works, who installs it, who manages it, and why, in a country where everyone knows where every illegal wire is, nobody has cut them down. The Kunda system, the high-voltage hacking. It takes 30 seconds to bypass the law in Pakistan. That is not an exaggeration. 30 seconds. It starts with a piece of metal, a length of wire, and the electricity that the state could not deliver is suddenly flowing into your home. No contract, meter, or paperwork. No waiting, just a hook on a line and the lights come on. That hook has a name, the Kunda, and it has done more to reshape Pakistani society than any election, any policy, any government in the country's history. The first Kunda I ever saw, I was 11 years old. My uncle threw it over the line outside our house in 15 seconds flat. He did it like it was nothing, like making tea. I thought he was a genius. Half the street was already connected the same way. I just did not know it yet. To understand the Kunda, you first have to understand what it is not. It is not a sophisticated hack, nor is it a technical exploit requiring specialist knowledge. It is not the work of organised crime or underground networks. It is, at its core, an embarrassingly simple device. A metal hook attached to a wire, thrown over a live distribution line on the nearest pole. The other end runs into your home. That is the entire system. What makes it extraordinary is not the technology, it is the scale. According to Pakistan's own energy ministry, somewhere between 40 and 50% of all electricity distributed in the country is consumed without being billed. In some distribution zones, that number climbs above 70%. This is not a problem at the edges of the system. This is the system. The Kunda is not Pakistan's electricity crisis. It is Pakistan's electricity solution, unofficial, illegal, and completely normalized. Pakistan's electricity distribution companies officially reported losses of over 500 billion rupees in a single year due to theft and non-payment. To put that in perspective, that is more than Pakistan's entire annual federal education budget. The country is losing more money through electricity theft every year than it spends on educating its children. Now here is where it gets interesting. Because the Kunda did not stay simple for long. In the beginning, it was individual, one family, hook, wire, and a pole. But as more and more households connected, as the practice spread from one lane to the next, something unexpected happened. The Kunda became organised. In Pakistan's larger informal settlements, a new figure emerged, locally known as the Bijli Wala, the electricity man. He is not employed by any utility, nor does he hold any licence. He has no official existence of any kind, and yet, in the neighbourhoods where he operates, he is the most important person on the street. The Bijli Wala manages the neighbourhood's entire parallel electricity network. He installs the connections and fixes them when they fail. Also, he manages the load across the lines, making sure nothing overheats and starts a fire. Every household he serves pays him a flat monthly fee. No invoice or contract, just an arrangement that works better than the official one. And he pays the bribes that need to be paid to the people who are supposed to report him. He is, in every practical sense, running a private electricity company, without a single piece of paper to show for it. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone uses his service. The meter reader knows, the lineman knows, the local police know. Nobody says anything because everyone is getting something from the arrangement. That is how Pakistan works. If everyone knows, why does nobody stop it? That question sits at the centre of the Kunda story. And the answer is not simple. It involves money, politics, class, and a state that has been looking the other way for so long that looking away has become official policy. Start with the utility workers. The linemen and meter readers who cover these neighbourhoods are not highly paid. They are not well supported. However, they work long shifts in intense heat, managing infrastructure that is decades past its replacement date. And every month they walk past hundreds of illegal connections that they are theoretically supposed to report. Many of them do not. Because reporting means confrontation. It means paperwork. It means pressure from above to produce results in an area where doing so is impossible, without mass disconnections that no one in government wants to authorise. And it means turning down the quiet arrangement that the Bijliwala has already offered them. Then there is the political layer. In Pakistan's local and national election system, electricity has been a tool of patronage for decades. Candidates promise to fix the power situation in their constituencies. What this has often meant in practice is not fixing the infrastructure, but arranging for enforcement to be suspended, for bills to go uncollected and the Kunda operators to be left alone. The illegal connection is not just a survival tool for the poor, it is a political instrument for the powerful, a favour that can be given and a threat that can be held in reserve. And then there is the simplest reason of all. The one that nobody in an official position will say out loud, but that the Bijliwala on the street will tell you without blinking. Too many people are connected. In neighbourhoods where 60, 70, 80% of households are on the Kunda, cutting the illegal connections does not mean bringing people back into the official system. It means cutting their power entirely, because they cannot afford the official tariff, because the official infrastructure in their area cannot handle the load anyway, because the alternative to the Kunda is not legal electricity, it is darkness. And in Pakistan, darkness is not a political option. In Karachi's Orangi town, one of the world's largest urban settlements with a population of over 2 million, independent researchers have estimated that the majority of electricity connections are either fully illegal or involve significant meter tampering. The official utility serves the area. The official utility cannot tell you how much of what it distributes is actually being paid for, because it does not know. Now you understand why the government does not cut the wires. Not because it cannot find them, because cutting them would mean admitting out loud in public that the official system has failed so completely that the illegal one is the only thing keeping the lights on. That is not a technical problem. It is a political catastrophe, and no government in Pakistan's history has been willing to own it. But the Kunda system did not arise from political cowardice alone. It appeared because ordinary people made a calculation. A very simple, rational, and human calculation. And to understand that calculation, you have to stand where they stood, in a kitchen, in the summer, and in the heat, looking at a bill you cannot pay and a fan that has not moved in 8 hours. The Kunda is not just about free electricity, it is the final answer for people who have run out of other options. And to understand why they ran out, you have to understand what electricity actually costs in Pakistan. Not in rupees, in everything else. The Kunda is not a crime in this neighbourhood. It is a right. The crime is what came before it. The crime is what made it necessary. The system within the system is now visible. The hook on the wire, the bijliwala on the corner, and the meter reader looking the other way. There is also the politician who calls it reform and means the opposite. The family in the back room has not paid a bill in 4 years and has never once been disconnected. This is Pakistan's electricity grid, the real one. Not the one in the ministry's reports, not the one in the IMF's spreadsheets, the one that actually works. But why did it come to this? Why did so many people reach the same conclusion at the same time? Why did an entire nation look at its official electricity system and decide, collectively, that the law was not worth following? The answer begins with a number so large it is almost meaningless until you understand what it represents. Pakistan's circular debt, the financial black hole at the centre of the electricity system. The thing that explains everything and that nobody has been able to fix for 20 years. That number is $9 billion, and it is growing. Survive or pay, the impossible choice, facing millions. When the choice is between feeding your children or paying for light, the law becomes irrelevant. That is not a metaphor in Pakistan. That is a Tuesday. To understand why tens of millions of people have made peace with living outside the law, you have to understand what the law is asking them to pay, and what they get in return for paying it. Because the story of Pakistan's electricity crisis is not just a story about theft. It is a story about a financial system so broken, so predatory, so completely disconnected from the reality of ordinary life, that opting out of it stopped feeling like a crime a long time ago. It started feeling like survival. My bill last summer was 11,000 rupees for 1 month. I earn 18,000 rupees a month driving a rickshaw. Tell me, which one do I pay? That rickshaw driver lives in Lahore. He has 3 children. He has legal electricity. After 2 months of choosing between the bill and the groceries, he made a different arrangement. He knows a man on his street. The man knows someone. Now his electricity costs him 1,500 rupees a month, flat rate. No surprises, taxes or surcharges he cannot pronounce and does not understand. He is not unusual, he is the rule. To understand how electricity became unaffordable in a country that generates enough of it to go around, you have to understand 3 things. Inflation, the IMF, and the circular debt. Each one feeds the next. Together, they have built a trap that Pakistan cannot escape without pain so severe that every government has chosen to delay it instead. Start with inflation. Pakistan has experienced some of the worst inflation in its history over the past 5 years. At its peak in 2023, annual inflation exceeded 38%. Food prices doubled, fuel prices spiked. The cost of everything a family needs to survive rose faster than any wage could keep up with. In that environment, electricity tariffs did not just rise, they exploded. Between 2021 and 2024, the average electricity tariff in Pakistan more than doubled. For low-income households already spending a disproportionate share of their income on utilities, the new rates were simply impossible. Not difficult or uncomfortable, just impossible. The math did not work. It did not come close to working. And the reason the tariffs rose so sharply leads directly to the second part of the trap. The IMF. Pakistan has sought bailouts from the International Monetary Fund more than 20 times since 1958, more than almost any other country on Earth. Each time the IMF has attached conditions, and consistently those conditions have included raising electricity tariffs to what the fund calls cost recovery levels. The logic is straightforward. If the utilities charge less than it costs to generate and deliver electricity, they lose money. And if they lose money indefinitely, the government has to cover the gap. When the government covers the gap while already running a deficit, the debt grows. The IMF wants the tariffs raised so the sector can eventually pay for itself. The logic is sound. The application has been catastrophic, because raising tariffs in a country where 40% of electricity is already being stolen, where the grid is losing money at every level, and where ordinary people are already stretched to breaking point, does not increase revenue the way a spreadsheet suggests. It increases the number of people who stop paying entirely. And it increases the number of people who make the calculation that the rickshaw driver in Lahore made. Also, it grows the parallel system faster than any enforcement operation can contain. The IMF pushes for higher tariffs. The government raises them. More people move to the Kunda. Less revenue is collected. The deficit grows. The IMF comes back with another condition. The cycle repeats. This is the trap. And at its center is the number that explains everything. Pakistan's circular debt, the accumulated financial shortfall in the electricity sector, has surpassed $9 billion, 2.5 trillion Pakistani rupees. It is the single largest structural problem in Pakistan's economy. It has been growing for 20 years. Every government has promised to fix it. None has. Because fixing it requires either raising tariffs to levels that would trigger mass unrest, or cutting subsidies to politically connected interests that nobody in power wants to confront. The circular debt is not an accounting problem. It is a political one. And to understand it properly, you have to understand how it works. Here is the cycle. Power generation companies produce electricity. They sell it to distribution companies. The distribution companies sell it to consumers. But the distribution companies collect only a fraction of what they bill, because a significant portion of consumers either cannot pay, do not pay, or are connected to the grid through a kunda and never receive a bill. So the distribution companies fall short. They cannot pay the generation companies in full. The generation companies cannot pay their fuel suppliers. The fuel suppliers reduce supply. Generation drops, load shedding increases, more people turn to the kunda, even less revenue comes in, the debt grows, round and round, year after year, getting bigger, getting worse. And at every point in the cycle, real people are making real decisions about real bills that they genuinely cannot afford. The system is designed, whether anyone intended it this way or not, to push people out of it. And once they are out, there is almost no reason to come back in. Consider what the official system actually delivers to the family that pays their bill on time every month. 12 to 16 hours of load shedding per day in peak periods. A bill that includes charges for electricity they did not use, taxes they did not agree to, and surcharges added to recover the costs of the debts created by the very system that is failing them. And when they call to complain, they wait. When the lineman comes, he does not come quickly. Eventually, the power comes back on and flickers. And when the next bill arrives, it is higher than the last one. Now consider what the kunda offers. Flat rate, predictable cost, relatively stable supply in areas where the Bijliwala manages his network competently. No surprise charges, incomprehensible surcharges or paperwork. No waiting on hold. The comparison is not flattering to the official system. I paid my bills for 11 years, on time, every month, and the power still went out for 14 hours a day. My neighbour never paid a single bill in 11 years. He had the same 14 hours of load shedding. So I asked myself, what exactly am I paying for? That question, asked by millions of Pakistanis across all income levels, is the most damning indictment of the electricity system. Not the kunda, not the Bijliwala, not the circular debt, the simple, unanswerable question of what the honest person gets that the dishonest person does not. And the answer in most of Pakistan is nothing. This is why the Kunda spread beyond the slums. It has reached the middle-class neighborhoods, commercial zones, and the industrial estates. Because of the rational calculation, when you actually run the numbers, the points are in the same direction regardless of your income. Pay for a system that does not work, or pay less for a system that does. The morality collapses under the math. But the economic crisis in Pakistan's electricity sector is not only about what ordinary people pay, it is about something that very few people outside Pakistan know. A deal that was supposed to save the country may be slowly destroying it instead. A $62 billion investment from the world's second largest economy. Infrastructure built at scale and speed that Pakistan's own government could never have managed. Power plants are rising from the desert in record time. And a set of contracts so one-sided that Pakistan is now paying billions of rupees every month for electricity it cannot distribute, afford, or renegotiate without risking a diplomatic incident with its most powerful neighbour. The Chinese connection. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, known as CPEC, was announced in 2015 as a game-changer. $62 billion in Chinese investment. Roads, railways, ports, and above all, power plants. Pakistan's chronic electricity shortage would be solved. The lights would stay on. The economy would grow. The future would arrive. Parts of it did arrive. Chinese-funded power plants came online. Generation capacity increased significantly. On paper, the shortage should have eased, but the contracts governing those power plants contained a provision now at the centre of Pakistan's financial crisis: capacity payments. Pakistan agreed to pay the Chinese power companies a guaranteed fee for the electricity their plants could generate, regardless of whether Pakistan actually used it. It sounded reasonable at the time. Power companies need guaranteed revenue to justify the investment. That is standard practice globally. The problem in Pakistan's case is the scale, and the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. Pakistan's transmission infrastructure was not upgraded fast enough to carry the new electricity from the Chinese plants to where it was needed. The distribution system was still losing half its revenue to theft and non-payment. Consumers who needed the power could not afford to pay the rates required to cover the capacity payments. So Pakistan found itself in a situation almost too absurd to believe, paying billions of rupees a month for electricity that it could not use. While its people sat in the dark, the circular debt grew. The IMF demanded higher tariffs, and more families turned to the Kunda. The power existed, the bills still had to be paid, and the lights were still going out. We were told CPEC would fix everything. More power, better infrastructure, a new Pakistan, and in some ways, yes, there is more capacity. But capacity is not electricity in your home. Capacity is a number in a report. My neighbourhood still goes dark at noon. The economics of despair in Pakistan's electricity sector are not complicated once you see the whole picture. A government that cannot raise tariffs high enough to cover costs because its people cannot afford to pay them. A circular debt that grows faster than any reform can address. An international debt obligation that requires payments for electricity that never reaches the consumer. And at the bottom of all of it, a family making a decision with a kunda and a bamboo pole that the entire system, in its own broken way, has been quietly encouraging them to make. The lights go out in Pakistan every day. The reasons why are stacked one on top of another, layer after layer, going back decades. Poverty, policy failure, political cowardice, international debt, elite capture. Each layer makes the next one worse. Each decision delays the reckoning that everyone knows is coming and nobody wants to be standing near when it arrives. But while the economists argue about circular debt, the diplomats argue about CPEC, and the politicians argue about tariffs, ordinary Pakistanis are living with the consequences. Not as statistics, as people, with children to feed, with businesses to run, with lives that do not stop moving just because the power does. What does daily life actually look like when the electricity is a rumour and the darkness is a guarantee? The geopolitics, the Chinese connection. China built the plants to save Pakistan. Now those same plants might be bankrupting it. That sentence sounds like the setup to a conspiracy theory. It is not. It is the conclusion of Pakistan's own parliamentary committees, independent economists, and international financial analysts who have spent years trying to understand why a country that receives $62 billion in energy investment still cannot keep its lights on. To understand where Pakistan is today, you have to go back to 2015, to a handshake, to a corridor, and to a promise that looked at the time like the answer to everything. When CPEC was announced, people in my neighborhood were celebrating. Finally, they said. Finally, someone is going to fix the power. I was more cautious. I have lived in Pakistan long enough to know that when something sounds too good, you should read the small print. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, $62 billion in Chinese investment, roads, railways, the Gweida port, and above all, power plants, coal plants, gas plants, hydroelectric projects, renewable installations. A wave of energy infrastructure designed to add thousands of megawatts to Pakistan's grid and end the load shedding that had been strangling the country for decades. On the surface, it was exactly what Pakistan needed. The country had a chronic electricity shortage. China had capital, construction capacity, and a strategic interest in a stable Pakistan as the anchor of its Belt and Road Initiative. Pakistan got the infrastructure it could not have built itself. China got investment returns, strategic positioning in South Asia, and access to the Arabian Sea through Gweida port. The deal made sense for both sides. The plants were built. Many of them were faster than Pakistan's own government had built anything in decades. By the early 2020s, Pakistan's generation capacity had increased significantly. The power existed. The problem was the attached contract. If China built the plants and the plants are generating electricity, why is Pakistan still paying more than it can afford for power it cannot deliver to its people? The answer is two words: capacity payments. When Pakistan signed the CPEC energy agreements, it agreed to pay the Chinese power companies a guaranteed fee based on the capacity of their plants, not on the electricity actually used, on the electricity that the plants were capable of generating, whether Pakistan needed it or not, whether Pakistan's grid could carry it, whether Pakistani consumers could afford it or not. The logic behind capacity payments is not unusual in global energy finance. Power companies need guaranteed revenue to justify building a plant. Without that guarantee, no private investor commits. The structure is standard. But in Pakistan's case, three things went wrong at once, and when all three hit together, the damage was severe. First, Pakistan's transmission infrastructure was not upgraded quickly enough to carry the electricity generated by the new plants. The plants came online. The grid could not absorb the output. Pakistan was paying for electricity. It literally could not move from where it was produced to where it was needed. Second, the distribution system was still losing enormous revenue to theft and non-payment. Even when electricity reached the network, a significant portion was stolen through kundus, or billed to consumers who did not pay. The revenue needed to cover the capacity payments was not coming in. Third, the capacity payments were denominated in dollars. As the Pakistani rupee collapsed, losing more than half its value in a few years, the rupee cost of those dollar-denominated payments roughly doubled. Pakistan was paying more in local currency every single month for contracts signed when the rupee was worth twice what it is today. The result was a financial catastrophe in slow motion. Pakistan is locked into billion-dollar payment obligations for electricity it could not distribute, could not afford, and could not renegotiate without risking serious diplomatic consequences with its most powerful ally. Between 2020 and 2024, Pakistan paid an estimated 2.5 trillion rupees in capacity payments to independent power producers, a significant portion to Chinese-funded plants under CPEC agreements. Money paid for electricity generated but never delivered to a consumer. In a country where millions steal power to survive, the government was simultaneously paying billions for power nobody used. Pakistan knew the contracts were problematic. Officials raised concerns during negotiations. They signed anyway, because the alternative was more years of darkness, and politically, more darkness was not survivable. This is the sovereignty trap that the CPEC energy deals created. Pakistan needed the investment desperately. China offered it on terms that were commercially standard, but structurally dangerous for a country with Pakistan's grid conditions. Pakistan accepted because the short-term political benefit of appearing to solve the electricity crisis outweighed the long-term financial risk. The contracts assumed two things: that Pakistan's grid would be upgraded fast enough to carry the new electricity, and that the rupee would hold its value. Neither happened. The politicians who signed those contracts are not in office anymore. The contracts are still here, the payments are still going out every month, and the lights are still going off every afternoon. That is the part nobody wants to explain. The geopolitical dimension extends beyond the contracts. Pakistan's relationship with China is not simply transactional. It is strategic, deeply embedded, and carries a weight that makes renegotiation politically complicated in ways an ordinary commercial dispute would not. China is Pakistan's most significant strategic partner. It has provided diplomatic cover at the United Nations and has supplied military equipment. It has invested in infrastructure at a scale unmatched by any other partner. The relationship is described officially as higher than the mountains and deeper than the ocean. In practice, that means Pakistan has very limited leverage when pushing back on Chinese commercial interests. Several Pakistani governments have quietly explored renegotiating the most burdensome CPEC power contracts. Progress has been slow. The Chinese side has shown some flexibility in restructuring payment timelines, but has been resistant to fundamental changes to the capacity payment model. And Pakistan, dependent on Chinese goodwill across multiple dimensions of its national security, cannot push too hard without consequences that go far beyond electricity bills. Meanwhile, the IMF sits on the other side. The fund has been deeply involved in Pakistan's finances through multiple bailout programs. Its conditions consistently require Pakistan to reduce energy subsidies, raise tariffs, and move toward cost recovery pricing. These conditions are economically logical. They are also given the capacity payment burden, extraordinarily difficult to implement without imposing pain that the political system cannot absorb. Pakistan is caught between two giants. The IMF is demanding fiscal discipline and higher tariffs. China is holding contracts that guarantee payments regardless of Pakistan's fiscal position. And in the middle, a government trying to keep the lights on, the economy from collapsing, and the population from revolting. The Kunda, seen from this angle, is not just a response to poverty or a failure of infrastructure. It is a rational response to a geopolitical trap. When the official electricity system is too expensive due to obligations that no one has explained to the consumer. When the grid cannot deliver on its promises because of structural failures that no one has fixed, no one talks. The bill arrives every month, full of charges meant to service debts created in conference rooms the ordinary person will never enter. The hook over the wire stops looking like theft. It starts looking like the only logical move available. Pakistan cannot easily escape the CPEC payment obligations. It cannot raise tariffs high enough to cover them without triggering mass unrest. It cannot reduce the circular debt without confronting the political interests that benefit from it. It cannot go to the IMF for another bailout without promising reforms that will make electricity even more expensive for people who already cannot afford it. The trap is real and the exits are narrow. Also, the wires above the street keep multiplying. We are paying for electricity we do not receive so that companies we did not choose can meet obligations we did not agree to. And then we are told that the solution is to pay more. I am not an economist, but even I can see that this does not add up. But the geopolitical story is only the frame. Inside it, the human story continues. People wake up every morning and organize their entire day around the electricity schedule. Businesses are deciding whether to invest in generators or simply close. Children are doing homework by phone screen because the power has been out since noon. A country of 230 million people adapting in real time to a system that has comprehensively failed them. What does that adaptation actually look like from the inside? What does daily life feel like when the electricity is unreliable, the bill is unaffordable, and the kunda is the most dependable thing on the street? That is the story the statistics cannot tell, and it is the one that matters most. Life under tension, electrocutions, fires, blackouts, the hidden cost. There is a rhythm to life without reliable electricity. Pakistanis have learned it so well that it has become invisible, built into the architecture of the day. The timing of meals, the scheduling of sleep, and the organization of their work. Everything bends around the power schedule. It all accommodates the absence. You do not fight the darkness in Pakistan, you organize around it. But organizing around it has a cost, and that cost is not just an inconvenience. It lands on bodies, children and women who carry the heaviest load in a household that stops functioning every time the power goes out, on workers whose livelihoods evaporate with the electricity, on people who live inside a web of illegal wires that can, and regularly do, kill them. My neighbour's boy died 2 summers ago. He was 9 years old. The street flooded during the monsoon. There was a Kunda connection that had shorted against a wall. He walked through the water and touched the wall. That was it. 9 years old. Nobody was charged. Nobody was held responsible. It just happened, like it always happens. That story is not exceptional in Pakistan. It is common enough that the people who track such things have stopped being shocked by it. During monsoon season every year, the same cycle plays out. Rain floods the streets, illegal connections short against wet surfaces. People walk through water that has become electrified. They die. The news reports it, briefly. The next story arrives, the wires are still there. The next monsoon is 11 months away. Pakistan has one of the highest rates of electrocution deaths in the world. Researchers and journalists who have attempted to compile the data estimate that hundreds of Pakistanis die from electricity-related accidents every year. A significant proportion of those deaths is linked directly to illegal connections and poorly maintained infrastructure. Small, ordinary moments that turn fatal because the wire above is carrying current it was never designed to carry. Installed by someone with no training, running through a wall with no insulation, protected by nothing. And then there are the fires. Illegal electrical connections running through walls without insulation, without circuit breakers, and without any safety margin whatsoever are among the leading causes of urban fires in Pakistan's informal settlements. The wires carry more current than they were designed for. They heat up and arc. They ignite whatever is closest. In the dense, tightly packed neighbourhoods where the Kunda is most common, that means wooden walls, fabric partitions, gas cylinders, and cooking materials stacked within inches of cables that should never have been there. Every dry season, the same story repeats. A fire starts in a narrow lane in Orangi town or Layari, or a settlement outside Lahore. By the time anyone reaches it, 3 houses are gone, sometimes 10. The cause is listed as an electrical fault. The investigation goes nowhere and the wires go back up within days. The people living in those neighbourhoods know the risk. They live with it anyway, because the alternative is darkness in 45-degree heat. And between a fire that might happen and heat that is happening right now, the choice is not as simple as it looks from the outside. The physical danger of the Kunda is well known. Everyone in these neighbourhoods knows someone who has been hurt, and yet the connections multiply, which means the danger is being accepted as the price of the alternative. What is the alternative so bad that people choose this risk? The answer comes back to heat. Pakistan's summers are not uncomfortable. They are lethal. In Sindh and southern Punjab, temperatures regularly reach 45 degrees Celsius. Without electricity, fans, or any cooling, those temperatures kill. The very old and the very young are most vulnerable, and they are disproportionately found in the households that can't afford the official tariff. The choice Pakistani families are making is not between comfort and discomfort. It is between one kind of danger and another. The danger of the illegal wire and of the heat without it. Power outages cost Pakistan's economy an estimated $4.5 billion every year. Approximately 1.7% of GDP is lost annually, not to war or natural disaster, but to the simple failure of the electricity system to function. That is more than Pakistan spends on public health in a given year. The country is losing more in economic output than it invests in keeping its people alive. Now consider what that number looks like from street level. The small business owner who runs a tailoring shop in Lahore. His machines need electricity and his shop has load shedding for 12 hours a day. He bought a generator 3 years ago. The generator runs on diesel. The diesel costs more than his rent. He is spending money he does not have to compensate for a service he is paying for but not receiving. His margins are gone. He is not growing but only surviving. And he is 1 bad month away from not doing that either. The factory in Faisalabad is running 3 days a week instead of 5 because the cost of generator fuel has made full production unprofitable. Workers sent home. Orders delayed. Buyers are finding alternative suppliers in Bangladesh and Vietnam. Pakistan's share of global textile exports is quietly eroding because the lights will not stay on. I had 12 workers, good workers, skilled. I trained them myself. I had to let 8 of them go last year, not because the orders stopped, because I could not afford to run the machines to fill them. You know what that feels like? Telling a man with 4 children that you cannot keep the lights on? The human cost of Pakistan's electricity crisis is not abstract. It is a 9-year-old boy, dead in a flooded street. It is a factory worker with no income and no explanation. A small business owner watching everything he built become unaffordable, one power cut at a time. The danger is real, the damage is accumulating, and it is getting worse. But here is what the statistics risk missing. The people living inside this crisis are not broken by it. They are adapting. The solar panels appearing on rooftops across middle-class Lahore, collectively financed by neighbours pooling money because none could afford it alone. The WhatsApp groups track load-shedding schedules in real time. The young men are teaching themselves electronics from YouTube videos and building battery systems from salvaged parts. Pakistan's electricity crisis has produced, alongside its suffering, a remarkable ecosystem of bottom-up problem-solving. A country failed by its institutions is quietly building its own. We did not wait for the government to fix it. We fixed it ourselves. That is what Pakistanis do. The government is very good at creating problems. The people are very good at finding ways around them. That adaptability is real. But resilience is not a substitute for a functioning state. And the accumulated weight of this normality, year after year, has brought Pakistan to the most uncomfortable part of this entire story. The paradox that everyone lives inside and nobody talks about. The paradox. Illegal but normal. Here is the strangest thing about Pakistan's electricity crisis. Nobody hides it. The wires are not hidden underground or tucked behind walls or concealed in any way. They hang in plain sight above every street. The Kunda connections are visible from the road. The Biliwala collects his fees in broad daylight. And the meter reader walks past the illegal connections every month, files his report, and goes home. The lineman who installed 3 kundas last Tuesday will be back next week to install 3 more. Everyone sees it and knows it, and almost nobody stops it. That is not dysfunction. It is a social contract. A broken one, yes. An unofficial one, absolutely. But a contract nonetheless. An agreement reached without anyone signing anything that the official rules no longer apply to this particular situation, because the official situation has failed so completely that the rules protecting it have lost their moral authority. In Pakistan, electricity theft is illegal. It is also normal, and those two things stopped being in contradiction a long time ago. My grandfather stole electricity, my father stole electricity, I steal electricity, my son will probably steal electricity. So at what point does it stop being stealing and start being just the way things work? That question is not cynicism. It is a genuine philosophical problem, and it gets to the heart of what happens to a society when the law and the reality it was designed to govern drift so far apart that they no longer recognize each other. The law says you must have a metered connection and pay the official tariff. The reality is that the official tariff is unaffordable for a significant portion of the population. The law says electricity theft is a criminal offence. The reality is that between 40 and 50% of all electricity consumed in Pakistan is unmetered. The law says distribution companies must enforce payment. The reality is that enforcing payment in areas of mass non-compliance would require cutting power to millions of people simultaneously, which would trigger social unrest that no government is willing to risk. The law exists. The enforcement does not, and in that gap, an entire parallel civilization has grown. The paradox is not that people break the law, it is that breaking the law has become the responsible thing to do. The kunda keeps the food cold. The kunda keeps the fan running. The kunda keeps the small business open. The kunda keeps the children's medicine at the right temperature. In a country where the official system cannot reliably provide these things, the illegal system that can is not a crime. It is infrastructure. A 2022 survey of Pakistani households across multiple income levels found that electricity theft was reported in all economic groups, from the lowest income quintile to the upper middle class. The highest absolute losses to the grid occurred not in the poorest informal settlements, but in middle-income commercial zones where businesses systematically underreport consumption. Electricity theft in Pakistan is not a poverty problem. It is a trust problem, and trust, once lost at this scale, does not come back easily. Here is the answer to the question posed at the beginning of this documentary. Pakistan generates enough electricity to power every home in the country. So why are the lights still off? Because the system built to deliver that electricity has been hollowed out. The circular debt drained it financially. Political patronage drained it institutionally. Capacity payments locked it into obligations it cannot meet. And the distribution network lost half its revenue to a parallel system that the state quietly encouraged and then lost the will to dismantle. The lights are off because, for certain people, keeping them off is more profitable than turning them on. The wires stay up because cutting them would mean owning the failure. And in Pakistan, nobody owns the failure. They just add another surcharge to the bill of the people who are still paying. What happens if the grid collapses tomorrow? It is not a hypothetical question in Pakistan. It is a scheduled one. The grid is no longer failing slowly, it is failing faster. The transformers carrying double their rated load are aging without replacement. Also, the transmission lines running at capacity are fraying without maintenance. The circular debt consuming the utilities has left almost nothing for infrastructure investment. And every new Kunda connection added to an already overloaded network brings the system one small step closer to the edge. What happens if it goes over? Engineers and energy economists who have studied Pakistan's grid describe the collapse scenario in non-dramatic terms. They are clinical. And that makes them worse. A cascade failure, where one overloaded transformer trips, pulling load onto neighbouring transformers that are also overloaded, which in turn trip, pulling load further down the line, can take a national grid from functioning to dark in minutes. It has happened in Pakistan before. The nationwide blackout of January 2023 left almost the entire country without power for nearly 24 hours. The official cause was a technical fault in the transmission system. The underlying cause was a grid so stressed, so underfunded, and so overloaded by decades of deferred maintenance that a single point of failure was enough to bring everything down. That was a warning, not a solution. If a sustained collapse comes, the consequences go far beyond dark streets and warm food. Pakistan's water supply is electrically pumped. Its hospitals run on grid power with generator backup that lasts hours, not days. Its telecommunications infrastructure, its financial system, its fuel distribution network, all of it depends on electricity that the grid is increasingly unable to guarantee. A country of 230 million people without reliable power is not just inconvenienced, it is destabilized. And yet the people at the bottom of this system, the ones living under the wires, paying the bijliwala and organising their days around the load-shedding schedule, are already building the answer, not because anyone asked them to, because they had no choice. The solar panels on the rooftops, the community battery systems, microgrids are emerging in rural Sindh. Pakistan's future grid will not come from a ministry, a Chinese contractor, or an IMF condition. It is going to come from the street, from the same instinct that threw the first Kunda over the first wire decades ago. The instinct that says, we need this. Nobody is coming to fix it, so we will fix it ourselves. That may be the only thing that saves the lights from going out for good.